With the battery disconnected, carefully unsnap the center console trim cover from the center console. This trim tool can help in this process but is not absolutely necessary. Set the center console trim piece off to the side of the center console or disconnect the wiring. Remove the 4 screws that secure the shifter boot ring to the center console using a Phillips head screwdriver. The shift knob, shifter boot, and shifter boot ring are all connected as one assembly. Remove this assembly by pulling straight up forcefully and slightly twisting side to side if necessary. Use extreme care not to hit your face or injure yourself, since the assembly requires a fair amount of force in some Camaros to remove it completely from the vehicle, and it can slide off rather quickly when force is applied. With the vehicle safely in the air, locate the transmission's rear crossmember and loosen but do not remove the 4 crossmember bolts using a 15mm socket. This should allow the crossmember to move down anywhere from a ½ inch to 1 inch, increasing the area needed to access and remove the stock shifter. It should be noted that in some vehicles, this step may not be necessary as there may be adequate clearance to access and remove the shift mechanism. Locate the lower rubber dust boot at the bottom of the shifter and notice the different tabs on each corner. Pull each tab out and away from the shifter just enough to slide it over the lip on the shifter. This boot is connected to other places on the vehicle, so it is okay to just let it hang. Do not attempt to separate it completely from the vehicle. With the connection between the factory shift lever and shifter assembly exposed, remove the square clip on both sides of the cross pin that secures this connection using a flathead screwdriver. Make sure not to damage both clips as they will be reused. Push out the pin and separate the change rod from the factory shift lever, allowing the change rod to hang out of the way. It should be noted that in some vehicles, this pin may be difficult to push out by hand and may require the use of a screwdriver to help push it out. Be careful not to damage this pin as it will also be reused. Using a 10mm socket, remove the 2 bolts that hold the mounting plate and shift lever in the aluminum shifter casting. Remove the mounting plate and lower the shift lever out of the vehicle. Take the supplied grease and only apply it to the O-rings on the aluminum Hurst shifter pivot housing. Notice that one side of the lever is ridged and the opposite side is smooth. Also, notice the longer step side of the shifter pivot housing. Insert the Hurst shifter into the main center hole of the aluminum shifter assembly, inserting the lever so that the step in the shifter pivot housing faces the driver's side and the ridged surface of the lever faces the passenger side of the vehicle. Make sure to align the thread screw holes during this process. Apply no more than a drop of the supplied Loctite thread adhesive on the threads of each countersunk mounting hole. Using a 4mm hex drive socket, insert one of the mounting screws into the aluminum shifter assembly holes. Repeat the process for the other side and tighten both screws anywhere from 3 to 4.5 foot-pounds. Slide the change rod over the edges of the shifter pivot housing and align the holes. Reinsert the cross pin to connect the linkage together, being careful not to damage the soft Teflon bushings. Secure the cross pin with the original factory locking clip and repeat the process for the other side. Grip the tabs on the lower dust boot with your fingers and slide the boot's lip up and into the channel on the shifter assembly housing. It is critical to ensure that this lip sits flush in the channel or your boot may fall down or be pulled off by the driveshaft while operating the vehicle. Evenly retighten the 4 bolts in the transmission crossmember and torque them to 43 foot-pounds. Safely lower the vehicle back down to the ground. If you plan on reusing the factory upper stick and knob attachment, then slide one of the supplied Hurst boot supports past the 2 holes in the shifter lever. Take the lip of the upper factory dust boot and slide it up over the Hurst boot support, making sure that the boot support and rubber boot leave enough room to secure the Hurst upper stick attachment. Line up the ridged edges of the factory upper stick attachment with the shifter lever and insert the stick mounting washers and screws and tighten them using a 7/32 inch hex wrench. Slide the factory shift knob and boot over the factory upper shifter and lower it into place, making sure it securely snaps into place and doesn't twist on the shaft. If you plan on installing the Hurst upper stick attachment, then slide one of the supplied Hurst boot supports past the 2 holes in the shifter lever. Take the lip of the upper factory dust boot and slide it up over the Hurst boot support, making sure that the boot support and rubber boot leave enough room to secure the Hurst upper stick. Line up the ridges of the Hurst upper stick attachment with the ridges on the Hurst shifter lever while lining up the mounting holes. Insert the Hurst mounting washers and screws and tighten them using a 7/32 inch hex wrench. Flip the factory shifter boot inside out and cut the zip tie that holds the shifter boot to the shift knob using a pair of cutting pliers. Slide one of the supplied Hurst boot supports down the shaft of the Hurst upper stick attachment so it's just past the letter T of the Hurst logo. With the factory shifter boot inside out, slide the boot with the top down over the Hurst upper shifter attachment just over the Hurst boot support. Secure the shift boot to the boot support, tightening the supplied zip tie around the area where the previous zip tie had been and making sure that the new zip tie sits in the channel of the boot support when tightened. Trim away the excess tail of the zip tie using a pair of cutting pliers if necessary. Move the shifter boot ring down and slide it into position, making sure that the shifter boot is seated properly. Using a Phillips head screwdriver, tighten the 4 screws that secure this piece to the vehicle. Reconnect any of the center console connections that may have been disconnected from the center console trim piece and reinstall the center console trim piece by carefully snapping each snap connector into place. Thread the appropriate jam nut related to the particular Hurst shift knob you would like to install down the Hurst upper stick attachment. Thread the Hurst shift knob down the shaft until it stops, and then back it off just enough to align the Hurst logo or shift pattern to your liking. Spin the jam nut back up toward the shift knob until it meets the knob. Using a 9/16 inch open box wrench, carefully tighten the jam nut while holding the shift knob to secure the shift knob in place. Before operating the vehicle, test the shifter through all gears, making sure that each gear, including reverse, can be engaged fully and smoothly without binding or rough movement. Also, ensure that the shifter fully and smoothly self-centers itself when in neutral, and the shifter does not hang when moving in the reversed, first to second gear, or fifth to sixth gear planes. Please make sure to correct any problems before operating the vehicle. Now go out and enjoy your new Hurst shifter.